Hello, welcome to another episode of Recon Jeep Mods. Today we're going to talk about cutting the fenders and making more clearance for bigger tires in the wheel arches. A common way to do this is the cut and fold. You can search for it here on YouTube, and there's a lot of write-ups and videos explaining how to do it. I'm gonna do it a bit different, because with the normal cut and fold you gain about 1.5 inch of more clearance for the tire. With my method, which should be called, or it's not my method, but the way I'm gonna do it, it's more like a cut and weld. It's a little bit more work, but not that much, but you gain about 3 inch of more clearance for the tires in the wheel arches. And with more clearance you can fit larger tires with less lift. Okay, here we go. Start by removing the stock fender flares. All my bolts and screws was very rusted, so I had to use my grinding disc to get them off. And normally you cut small grooves like this, and you need to be careful, because these are the spot welds that's keeping the inner steel sheet metal together with the outer sheet metal. So normally you cut like edges in between all of these, along that, and then you use a socket, a rubber hammer, and you just push it and it folds in like this. But that's gonna keep a lot of moisture and dirt and mud in there, and it's gonna rust. It's not it will take some years, but it will start to rust, and it will be a big mess. So I'm gonna do it a little bit different. I'm gonna cut like around here. This edge I'm gonna cut, keeping this edge all the way down to there. So I'm gonna remove a lot, but that means I need to weld the outer sheet metal together with the inner sheet metal. It's a bit more work, but I will get a much more clearance in the wheel arches. And I'm doing this mostly because of the rear TJ flares that I'm gonna use, and I want them to be in line with this edge, so they need to be positioned like up here. I'm gonna show you. I want my TJ flares to be positioned along this edge here, somewhere around there. And that means you will have this visible. It will look really bad, so I'm gonna cut as much as possible to have more clearance for the tire. In the common cut and fold method, you cut along these lines with your grinding disc, and then you just simply fold the sheet metal inwards, like that. But I'm gonna cut a bit further up along the line up here. But I'm gonna be careful to not cut through both the inner and outer sheet metal, and only cut through the outer one to begin with. with the cut and weld method, you're gonna cut right through the spot welds. And this time you're gonna cut through both the inner sheet metal and the outer one. Next step is to remove the pie cuts. They are also glued together with the spot welds, so you might need some force to remove them, as you can see. And when they are all removed, it's gonna look like this. And since the rear body on my XJ was in such a bad shape, I decided to just remove it. Next step is to weld the inner fender to the outer one, and to be able to bend the inner fender, you might need to extend the cutting grooves a little bit more with the grinding disc. In the rear part of my XJ, I'm gonna weld a piece of sheet metal in this area later on. Prepare for the weld process by removing paint and rust from the area along the edge. And then you use a rubber hammer or a steel hammer, if you prefer, to reshape the inner fender. Begin the weld process and weld small spot welds because the sheet metal is really thin. Use a cutting disc and remove the material that's sticking out of the body, but be careful to not remove the spot welds because that's the ones that keeping the inner and the outer sheet metal together. And then you use a grinding disc to remove the sharp edges and cut as close to the spot welds as possible. And then you use multibond or body glue to fill in the gaps. I also use this inside the wheel housing in the pie cuts. You could of course remove more sheet metal and weld in new ones, but I decided to use the multi-bond inside the wheel housings on this XJ as well. Yeah, that's how I did to gain 3-inch more of clearance in the rear wheel housings on my XJ. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that like button, and see you next time. Bye!